My name is David. My advisor for this project was Dr. Diane Mello-Goldner from the psychology department, and I'm very, very excited to talk to you all today about parenting styles and college selectivity. Who here is a BU student? Plenty of us. Is anyone here a BU parent? All right. Well, if your parents are here or your parents are elsewhere, you can tell them all about this. So, the fundamental research question, are BU parents different from other parents? Of course, I had to include the BU mom, BU dad hoodies. And I do want to include a note about language. The word parent in this presentation is going to refer to your primary caregivers. That can be a step parent, a foster parent, an adopted parent, really whoever raised you. The research answer was, of course, my Keystone project, which also qualified for honors in the psychology major. It was an empirical psychology thesis, meaning it did novel data collection. It wasn't just a literature review or a meta-analysis. I collected novel data from participants that I recruited to the study. The structure follows introduction, a method section, a results section, and a discussion section, which is the normal APA-style format of publishing papers. And this presentation will also loosely follow that. So in the psychology literature, since really the 1960s and 70s, two key traits have emerged when we talk about parents and when we study parents. Of course, there's far more to a parent than just these two traits, but the first one is warmth. Rather than explain these things at great length, people can usually think back about their parents or caregivers, and people can intuitively know if their parents were a little warmer or a little colder, somewhere in between. And the other trait is demandingness, how much parents control the behavior and actions of their children, how much they set limits and rules, and so on. And when we take these two traits, we can create 4 parenting styles. The first one, the cold and undemanding style, is the neglecting parent. That parent is what it sounds like. The permissive parent is also what it sounds like. That parent is warm and undemanding, placing very few demands and creating minimal rules. And the authoritarian parent is our first demanding style. That parent is cold and demanding. And the final style is the authoritative parent. That parent balances warmth with demands. We want to talk about Boston University students and what this means for us in comparing BU parents to other parents. Permissive parenting really has this long link with poorer academic outcomes. In Chinese middle schoolers or high schoolers in India or college students in Pakistan, we see routinely decreased academic performance as well as academic motivation. The drive to do well in school is lower for children of permissive parents, and this really holds true in countries across the globe. That was found in a meta-analysis of 400 plus studies. But what does this mean for college admissions? You can see there, I've mentioned middle school students, high school students, and college students, but the college admissions process that takes place at the end of high school has not yet been researched. So my hypothesis, or my research answer to my research question, is that BU parents are less permissive than parents of students at less selective colleges. Once again, the permissive parent is the warm and undemanding parent, and I think BU parents are less permissive than parents of students at less selective colleges. So my method used the parental authority questionnaire. This was established by Dr. John Burry in a peer-reviewed publication in 1991. I did modify it somewhat since it has very gendered language. I took away mentions of mother and father and gendered pronouns and switched them out to parent with neutral pronouns. A child answers 30 questions about their parents, so this is a child's perception of their parents, not actually asking the parent directly or observing the parent directly. And the highest of these 3 scores determines that style to be a parent's dominant style. My participants were 117 usable responses. Some of my friends were gracious enough to fill out my survey. I also recruited via email and social media, primarily the subreddits of other universities. And my participant demographics, this was a study that was biased in that it was majority white, majority female. Most grew up in the US, and the vast majority of people I recruited were raised by opposite sex parents who were married. So when people ask me what I did for the past couple of months, this graph is the best summary of it. So we have along the bottom permissiveness, authoritarianism, and authoritativeness, and this is a comparison between Boston University and less selective colleges. Those less selective colleges include UMass Boston, UMass Lowell, UMass Amherst, Emmanuel, Lesley, and other colleges with an acceptance rate of 40% or higher. Boston University, in the most recent available data, has an acceptance rate of 10.8%. So these colleges are at least 4 times more likely to admit a given student. And those 2 stars there indicate a statistically significant difference for authoritarianism and authoritativeness at these colleges. There was some difference in the means, but not at a statistically significant level. And the difference in permissiveness was statistically significant between Boston University and less selective colleges. If you're in a field that does not make use of p-values, that's essentially the probability that you are wrong. So I've supported my idea that those less selective colleges have more permissive parents, and there's hopefully less than a 1% chance that I'm wrong. When I gathered my data, I also looked at comparisons for US-born parents versus parents born outside of the US. There was a trend that was a bit smaller than the earlier difference, but still there, that non-US parents are more authoritarian than US-born parents. So to remind you, those authoritarian parents are cold and demanding, and that was something that I found that was interesting, and it was significant, and it sort of backs up a stereotype we sometimes see in popular media, movies, TV, and so on, where parents born outside the US are more authoritarian, and the American parents can often be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more relaxed, and so on. My personal favorite is this difference between psychology majors and non-psychology majors. Once again, the only really notable difference here is in permissiveness. Psych majors, you can see in red, have parents that are actually less permissive than students in other majors. My friends occasionally tease me as a psychology major, and they tease other psychology majors for being people that just want to sit around all day and think about their childhood and their parents and what went wrong and so on. And I certainly would have thought that psychology majors had more permissive parents, but this was actually the opposite of my expectation. You can also see there's a slightly larger p-value here, so this doesn't hit the standard 0.05 required for academically accepted statistical significance, but there is still a trend in that direction. For future research, I did not gather socioeconomic data. This was a flaw in my design, and in future research, I would absolutely do that differently, and I would encourage other researchers to do the same. Of course, BU tuition and UMass tuition, especially for in-state folks, are not exactly comparable, and that was not something I collected data for, family income, family background, and so on. And I think a wonderful next step would be developing an intervention to try and figure out, can we actually get a clinician or an educator or a parent to do something to actually change the outcomes of what happens to their kid when they apply to certain colleges. Dr. Anne Garenbeck-Shim was one of my panelists at my thesis defense some time ago, and the best way she could summarize it was limits in love. Whether you're communicating with a parent working with their child or commuting with the child themselves, communicating limits and love as 2 very, very important aspects of parenting, and parents should really strive to include both, and this, of course, is the authoritative style that balances love with limits. To conclude, I was able to support my hypothesis. BU parents are indeed less permissive. This adds to the existing research regarding middle school students, high school students, and college students, while also adding a bit of an asterisk, a bit of a support that also that period between high school and college is also impacted by permissive parenting. And I hope that this can begin to inform future research or begin to get parents and students and educators to think about the role of parenting styles in education, and specifically in college admissions. Thank you. Sure. Yeah.
So when people were filling out the survey, were they filling it out for one parent or both parents or averaging the 2?
Right. So
because often parents do not agree on parenting styles.
Absolutely. So at the start of the survey, participants indicated, were you primarily raised by one parent or 2? And then those with a single parent, of whom there were 7 out of 117. Again, single parent families were not very well represented here. But 110 of those participants did fill it out twice. One set of 30 questions for one parent and another set of 30 questions for another parent. And I'm very grateful for my participants for clicking through 60 multiple choice questions in addition to the other questions I already had. Yeah, thanks for your question. Sure, Chris.
Thank you, David, for this fantastic presentation. Just a quick question about you have this sort of 4 categories, descriptors of parenting styles. Neglecting doesn't turn up on your graph later, and just wondering if you could say a bit more about why. I think I have an idea, but yeah.
Sure, absolutely. So this PAQ, the Parental Authority Questionnaire, was established by John Bory. It's by far the most widely used questionnaire by researchers studying parenting styles. But I agree, a key flaw of this, it doesn't quantify the neglecting parent's behavior. My guess is permissive parenting is an active thing, actively showing love and affection for your child while being undemanding. Of course, the demanding styles of authoritarianism and authoritativeness, those are also very active in that the parent is placing demands and rules for the child. Neglecting is inherently an absence of something. So you're asking a child to observe the parent's behavior when what defines the neglecting style is that the parent wasn't around much to begin with. So that's my guess. However, in Bory's article, it actually is not even referenced why neglecting is left out, but that is my speculation.
Thanks so much for your presentation. Could you tell me a little bit more about some example questions or the style that they were asked? Were they more situational? Were they more true, false? What were those like?
Sure. So they're somewhere between specific and vague. They are Likert scale questions, so they're rated 1 through 5, strongly disagree, strongly agree, agree, disagree, or neutral. And good examples would be, growing up, my parents felt that in a well-run household, children should always listen to their parents and not question their authority. That would be authoritarianism. One question to quantify permissive parenting was, my parent believes that the world would be a better place if parents just let their children do what they want. Questions like that. So they're very broad and they're not specific to academics, but luckily a survey from the early 90s actually holds up pretty well. And they're still definitely applicable. And as I take it, and as some of my participants took it, they definitely were like, oh, this is some interesting stuff to think about. So they're between that line of specific and vague, where it's definitely about parenting and your relationship with your parents, but it doesn't get too specific.
All right, thank you so much, David.
Thank you.